Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Hue Virtual Chat. It is a lovely Tuesday in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and that's in Canada for any of our viewers viewing from abroad. And it is a balmy, I believe, -3. And yesterday it hit +5. We're Celsius. And boy, did everything melt. And let me tell you, when you live in Winnipeg, the heart of the continent, where it is sub-zero all the time, having -5 feels like it is 80 degrees. I'm just kidding. But anyways, we are going to, and the camera's just doing a little bit of adjusting. I do that all by remote too, folks. So I'm multi-talented, multitask all the time. Anyways, let's open the doors to all of our lovely ladies. I have a question about something that we want to talk about. And there you are. Hey, this is getting to be like old hat. It's almost like, like when we get together, meet in Starbucks, Charlotte, okay, we'll meet in Starbucks. Oh, yeah, yeah. Take that for granted. Amy says the other day, well, yeah, well, let's do the hot yoga. We can go. And I said, no, girl, there's no group classes. I can't be with you. It's like by myself. And she goes, no way. Yes, yes. But you know what? March 5th, this might all change. So everybody seems really quiet, so you can all unmute yourselves if you want.
Is that what they're saying, March 5th?
Yeah, apparently that's kind of the buzz or whatever, that they're going to rethink or revisit everything. And all things considered, we're like, I don't know, 4 point something, we've got down as low as 3.8 or whatever percent, whatever that means, but that's what we live by now, ladies. And I know it's so. There was an interesting thing talking about, and how I even try to avoid it now in conversations. So how are you doing?
Yeah.
And you kind of go, well, really good. Or, or my husband would say, oh yeah, I'm living the dream, and ha ha ha. And you know what? It's almost like you don't know what to say, but there's an interesting, I call it a word. I guess it's 2 words. You probably heard it, but just saying like, no, I'm pandemic fine. And it's sort of like, and they kind of gave a meaning to that and saying, well, yeah, you're healthy, you got a job, your family's good. And normally, everything's great, but you're still feeling kind of blah, right? And yeah, well, we're almost out of February, sorry. So Charlotte and Kristen, then we're almost out of the February blues. Hey, there's Linda.
Hey.
Welcome. Hey.
Hey, Amy.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
I know. We're all just, yeah. I don't know. So Charlotte, Kristen, are we out of it now? If I'm just waiting for February 28th to come, and then yes, March.
I think normally we'd be saying it almost out of the February blues, but given COVID is the start of the second February, it's just changed that dynamic completely.
I know.
I'm thinking about your comment earlier about, addressing your friends. We were FaceTiming one of my good friends and her husband the other night, and she kept saying, I'm not allowed to talk COVID. My husband's elbowing me. No more COVID talk. And so then it was like COVID-free, no talk. And then she'd go back to it. And it was very funny.
Oh, I know. Oh, but yeah, and it's, you just get kind of hard of trying to second guess and try to figure things out. And then you try to kind of just pivot and live your life, right, with all these new restrictions. But then sometimes you just want to throw it out the window and just Linda, you go ahead, because you've written some amazing things on your Instagram. And ladies, yes, I all encourage you, go to, I believe now we call it I Like You podcast, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we have all of our episodes. And it is a great way, really, to listen to our conversations and it will be a year. Like, I will do this until March 12th. And then, and then I might say, I can't do this now because I got to go to hot yoga or something. But like, really, and an incredible way to draw like information to like all of you, because Amy's a peer support worker too, to really kind of get a really interesting perspective on how we all kind of changed, right? All our feelings, and Linda too. I mean, for your life coach things, it is so amazing how, if you asked us a year ago, we would say, I'm not listening to that, like, what does that mean, kind of thing. So I really thank all of you for bringing, really, it's wisdom. I learned something again, over again, listen to something else and I go, oh, I didn't know that. So whenever you're bored or whatever, just subscribe, because there's a new one almost every day. We've got new content up there, and it's all thanks to you. So yeah, we were talking about pandemic fine, Linda.
About pandemic what?
It's called pandemic fine. I'm pandemic fine, meaning that kind of, you got your health, you got a job, your family's all good, everybody's safe, but you're still feeling down.
Yes.
Right? Like there's still.
I mean, I was actually just on the, there's a conference that's going on right now. It's just a 2-hour presentation with women's, I'm going to get it wrong. I just discovered the Women's Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub. They're associated with SheEO and another organization, and they were talking about the effects of women in business, their entrepreneurship, and how it's affected COVID. And, it like, I remember you saying this, Tracy, there's been tremendous impact, and especially on the BIPOC community. It's affected Indigenous women business owners often do not have access to internet, high-speed internet. Many women business owners are service-based, and of course that was shut down very quickly. So I think that, there still is a lot of struggle right now for many people. So I think the struggle is real. Like it's, if you're feeling down right now and discouraged, that makes sense. That's a normal response to a very difficult situation. So I think, I don't know that, for me, it has never worked ticking the boxes saying, I have my health, my kids are okay, my house is here. For other people, that really does work to go, okay, I'm fine. And they shift into that positive framework. But that, I don't know, that has never really worked for me, because I think it doesn't allow us to experience the real fear that we're going through, the real uncertainty, the disappointment. So many of us started businesses within the last, few years, and, we were hit really hard. So I think it's pretty normal to feel disappointment and loss and frustration, and sitting with those, and then, they will shift, and then you will feel gratitude again for, all the things that we actually do have. But I think it's okay to, acknowledge that, these feelings are real. There's some real shit has gone down, and we can.
That ain't a lie, hey?
Well, Amy, too. I mean, you're commenting, and this was a while ago, about the percentage of women now that are unemployed because of COVID, and that, we were kind of getting closer, right, with everything. And then now we've just fallen. And of all places, like in Europe, Italy is the worst, like for women working. And you think that, wow, but it is so kind of archaic still. Women only get like the lower paying jobs or the less educated jobs, very, very few at CEO or presidents. And even if you are an entrepreneur, you're kind of looked down upon, which is really terrible. And this whole thing, and because you think of Italy, like this beautiful country, right? Of wine and fashion, and oh my goodness, that must be a great place. But it isn't. And it's crazy. It's 21st century, and it is almost like impossible for women to succeed.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think the struggle is different. Like for us, we have a business, right? Like it's COVID, the sales and whatnot. And that's just one group of us. The group that I'm serving is like the underpopulated. Even like I have interviews coming up on Thursday, and we're trying to employ people with mental health, addictions, disabilities. And one of the challenges is that they can work from home, but they don't have internet or they don't have a laptop.
Yeah.
So what are those folks doing now? Like, I'm ready to work. I want to make money. I'm okay with minimum wage, but I don't have internet. Or I'm sharing with my with the first floor people, so I have to bring my laptop downstairs or my phone or whatever that may be, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like a different set of challenges. But yesterday I came across an article where the government is investing $1.2 million to an organization called OFE, so Opportunities for Employment. And they're coming out with like a pilot program employing single moms. So they'll provide the income, they'll provide the training, and they'll provide childcare for, yeah. And that hits home for me because I'm a single mom too. I'm like, this is beautiful. And throughout the pandemic, we have recognized that a lot of the skill sets we need to polish up on those. It's no longer like computer skills. Some people don't have it. They don't know how to interview on Zoom, and it's like retraining. So I'm excited that we're thinking that far in advance and providing the tools, the resources, and the additional training for women. Yeah. And Tracy, to add on to what you were saying about the how are you? I agree. That's such a loaded question. Now I ask, like, how are you winning today?
Oh yeah. Well, that's good. Or just hi.
Yeah. It's such a difficult question. Like, where do you go from there? I'm like, I'm doing well. Like, I mean, I'm still wearing a mask and I have to socially distance and whatnot. Yeah, it's a loaded question. So I prefer asking something else now.
Yeah, take it back. Take it back to the basics. Did you shower today? Like,
well, maybe that's a good thing if they got the mask on, though.
Hey, you know what? I said I was just at this conference and I heard something that was very interesting. Sorry, my dog's barking outside. Very interesting. This woman, and I can't, her name was Wendy Cukier. She was saying that she was taking a kind of a controversial opinion to say that for women in business or women looking for work, that we keep hearing that women should go towards STEM, computers, everything's going online. This is like, this is a real trend. We have to improve computer literacy. But she was saying for women in business in particular, many women do not want exponential growth. Many just want to live and support their families and live a good life, but not, they're not looking at crazy ambitious goals. They're looking to support their families. And she was saying that service-based industries like hair, like estheticians are actually, for some people, a better, more lucrative field than to push people towards STEM. And she's not saying that STEM is off the table. She's like 100%, I support it. But let's not forget that during the pandemic, what did we want? We wanted our hair cut. Like, we wanted to go get our nails done. We wanted to go for coffee with friends, and to really, her point was that we often look at entrepreneurship in a very male way that is all about, apps and digitization. And she was kind of turning that on its head and saying, let's look at entrepreneurship in a very female way and the strengths that we can dominate in entrepreneurship and that speak to more women. What does everyone think of that? I just thought that was a very interesting point of view.
Well, I totally agree with it. And I mean, look at Kirsten and Charlotte are a case in point. Peer support, right? Who are the best caregivers? Okay. Who are the ones can multitask? Yeah. And and who are the ones that guys look for support and some cuddling. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
and then I'll take it one step further. It's, it's exploring what works for the person that you're in front of. So I was just thinking that so often we're making assumptions of this is what they want. They want to go way up here, and maybe it's just it looks totally different. So asking those questions before you assume. I was thinking my daughter took that microblading eyebrow course years ago, and she was doing a fantastic job, and she was getting a whole bunch of cancer survivor women, and she was recreating their eyebrows, and she was making incredible money and she was averaging like 2 a week, and that was giving her more than enough money to spend while she was in university. And she ended up giving it up, which I thought was crazy, but that was her choice, because it was for a small amount of time, it was really good money, and then it worked with her schedule. And I think that's what Linda's kind of talking about too, is finding something that you can work with your life, your family, your hours, and then the income that you want to earn too. So,
and this woman was talking, of course, about the invisible workload of women. That, it's one thing to say that, you should have this amazing career or, have a full-time job, but then there is all of the other childcare and work at home that needs to be done, that is still done primarily by women.
No, that's true. So I'm asking you this then. Are you looking at how you're spending your time differently? Or what is free time? Or time for yourself? Because well, yeah.
I think I think we have to talk about balance in this conversation as well, because for so many females, and especially as Charlotte said, we sometimes we assume if somebody's opening a hair salon and that's their trade, and this is something they're stepping into, that they want this to be enormous and they want to have multiple locations and they're ready to work 50 to 60 hours a week. And often people are making choices, especially women, opening up businesses because they want to have some control and kind of create healthy balance in their life. I think we totally, we don't give a lot of trades, especially with females, enough credit when it comes to being a business owner and creating a lifestyle, creating a brand, creating balance. I think we totally cut them short. My oldest daughter, did the Aveda program, and so she works at an upscale salon, and she's very creative, and she absolutely loves her job. And so I've had this conversation with her a few times about, in a few years, you may want to open your own salon, and you may want to do this, assuming that this is perhaps something that she wants to continue with as a career path, which is not that she does hair, but like you could do so many things with this when you're good. And she's like, no, actually, no, I'm kind of thinking, I love working where I am. I'm looking forward to working part-time and balancing the family when we start a family. And maybe as they get older, I might consider something like that, but I'm not even thinking about that right now. So having conversations and looking at exactly what people are looking for, and not making those assumptions that they're going full steam ahead and going to take over the world. Because maybe they're just going to take over their world and in the way that works for them, and give them the opportunity to live their best life and make all their dreams come true. And we're just assuming that it's we're going from 0 to 60 really fast.
Oh, and you know what? That's right. You don't want to be doing and taking on the whole world so early in life. Like, you want to enjoy it. That's true. Amy, I want to go back to you when you're talking about people not having the right internet or having any internet. And even on Zoom, I mean, some people don't have cameras on their computers and they don't have like the proper iPhone. And there's all these things that are coming into factor now. How is it like, how can we make it a even playing field, because obviously these are going to be life skills and life tools that are going to be needed. And, how do we kind of, help each other, but also, make sure that everybody is on the same playing field. And I don't know if that'll ever happen. And then Rana jumps in here, and she could probably add into this whole kind of
no, that's a great
conversation.
question, Tracy. Like,
What is the
it's definitely a challenge, and because of COVID, there's different things that we kind of need to think about. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I think it's the education and the support, especially for the bigger organizations. Hey, like, can HR take a look at like what's going on and the impact from it? Like, how can we create those job opportunities? Even like employing people with mental health and addictions, it's not a write-off. It's just being flexible, right? And COVID has shown us that we can work from home and it's increased productivity. So if someone with like a mental health challenge per se, like maybe they can't be employed full time, but maybe you can work them in part time and like a different position, right? Having like reasonable accommodations for people and not be like, okay, yeah, you're fired or you're terminated because you no longer can perform. And then an individual lives off of EIA, $600 a month, Manitoba housing, bed bugs, etc.
Yeah.
How are we creating economic opportunities for individuals? And that number is just going to skyrocket and skyrocket because I feel like we have a blanket approach. It's just a Band-Aid. Those are not real opportunities where people can flourish and bloom and really feel good about themselves. And this comes back to our basic needs as an individual: the housing, the safety, the food, our kids. And if we can't fulfill that basic need, then more and more people are just EIA. I can't find a job. My employer doesn't want me working there. Ripple effect.
Oh, wow. I can't see that.
I just added that, Amy was talking about individuals with mental health challenges, and Kirsten and I always add in, there's a whole bunch of families that are trying to work and support family members who are struggling with mental health challenges too. So employers need to take a look at being a little bit more flexible to those situations as well. Big part of what Kirsten and I talk about almost weekly.
So, yeah, go ahead, Rana. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just going to jump in here. So I always feel like I'm kind of a broken record. People need to know what their rights are. I mean, you can't terminate somebody without accommodating them if they have a mental health issue, or if they have an addiction. That's against the law. You have human rights code, you have various legislation that does not allow an employer to do that without cause. So the first step is always to make sure, if you have a mental health issue, if you have an addiction issue, if you have any type of scenario, is to ask for accommodations. And that accommodation could be something along the lines of, hey, we're gonna scale back on some of your work, we're gonna help you, or encourage you to seek some kind of treatment. You're gonna have to show us evidence of this treatment, but this is the proper thing to do. So all of these conversations, yes, like Amy's saying, very difficult, but they're also very much against the law. Like, sorry, you know what I mean? You can't you can't terminate people like that at all. It's a no-no. So what are your rights? If you're in Manitoba and you're a provincially legislated employee, then you would go straight to the Human Rights Act. You'd go straight to the local human rights legislation. You would contact your labor, you'd contact your union, you would go through all of those processes, and you wouldn't just sit there and say, well, now I'm not employed. You have rights, and make sure that you are defending your rights. And if we want to talk about HR, the biggest failure in our province and in our nation right now is the fact that we do not educate employees on their rights as employees.
Well,
great point. That's a great point. And like legit reasonable accommodation is part of the HR policy. And the thing is that we're so afraid and speak of the retaliation. And that's why people don't move forward. Or even if you think about it in a retail setting, if you work your way up from like 16 or 18-year-old to that manager position, you're leading a retail store. How much management experience do you have, or HR knowledge do you have?
No, which is again, you know, like, and again, this is kind of like what I do in my practice, right? Like that's like I practice mainly in the area of employment and labor and human rights and First Nations labor and employment and human rights. So the thing is that again, the buck has to stop somewhere. And it is the employer's responsibility to ensure, for the sake of their employment, for their team, that everyone knows what their rights are. Because the more you, as an employer, give your employees that knowledge of what your rights are, you know what, it's a kind of selfish, because you're actually protecting yourself as well as an employer, right? Like, because everyone knows what they're allowed to do, everyone knows you know, what's allowed, right? And yes, in retail, I used to work retail for years. Like, frankly, it's kind of a very high turnover type of industry for sure, especially like just in malls and stuff in these days. But that does not defeat or does not negate the responsibility, you know. And I think that perhaps this is really a responsibility question. Like, if you are an employer, what actions have you taken during COVID to make sure that your employees know what you need to be doing to protect them? As an employee, you know, simply, you guys know your rights. Know your rights. Google the Human Rights Act. Google the Labor Code. If you're a federally regulated employee, Google the Canadian Labor Code. Like, everything is out there. You have every access. And sorry, human rights, labor disputes, they're not costly. They're free to your employee. They're free to your employee. And Amy, just to your conversation about retaliation, again, is a recognized issue of a complaint. So if you felt that somebody was retaliating against you in some way while you've had this complaint, that in itself is a complaint. So the protection mechanisms are in place. It's just a matter of knowledge. Who has that knowledge? Who is going to be the person who gives employees and employers that knowledge to make sure that, you know, we are all following the law. We also have constitutional rights. We all have, like, we have rights. We're not just sitting here kind of like, you know, like, oh, I'm going to get fired, I'm so scared. Yeah, you might get fired, but you have to be able to have the, you know, you know, the stamina, really, emotionally and mentally, to go. And I know it's very hard to take your employee to some kind of a dispute, but you have to be able to do that, because if you don't, you're going to get walked all over. Because employers are just trying to save themselves right now, right? Like, they just want to save the last dollar. So they're not really looking out for your employees' issues,
Well,
you know?
and I mean, and I don't
think
want
those are all
to.
great points, Rana. I know for myself that the expectation on women, especially, to take on those kind of challenges are, you know, to be able to find the strength to deal with possible rejection, possible retaliation, not being liked. All of those things are very challenging for most women to overcome, those hurdles, to take on those, you know, if you're challenges. So I think there, you know, it's wonderful that that knowledge is there, like that they would know about their rights, but you have to look at, will you access that? Or will you just, you know, say, it's not worth it to me. I don't, you know, I don't know how to cope with people not liking me. I don't know how to cope with people's anger towards me, and just back away. I think so. You know, I think the more we can empower women to, you know, and for sure start at a young age teaching young girls, you know, your whole mission in life is not to be liked. Your whole mission in life is not to please everybody. You know, you can, let's get you started younger, you know, learning to, you know, even like I see with my kids, like, it's okay if your teacher is annoyed with you, you know, like, you can manage that feeling, like, you can manage that feeling inside, you know. So talking about those kind of things at a young age. I know Charlotte and Kirsten, I'm sure you would agree that, yeah, being able to give people those tools that they need to challenge authority.
Yeah, I love everything that Rana said, and you as well, Linda. And I am completely on board. And in fact, when it came to my own family, that's how my family stories changed provincial policy, is because I challenged. I felt I challenged mission statements. I challenged our provincial government to provide a higher level of care, which is not accessible and doesn't even exist. So I am with you. However, the families, and on another point, the families that Charlotte and I work with, by the time they get to a point where they're actually thinking about speaking to HR, or they're wanting to talk to an employer, it's amazing the stigma with mental health and addictions, how they first of all, they lack the strength because of the years of battle fatigue, and they just can't move forward on that. But the stigma and the fear of outing themselves, the fear of coworkers knowing, the fear of outing a child or a spouse, there's so many layers to it. And this is where I love the idea of, this is where I get goosebumps. So peer support in the workplace, having someone you can go to and say, hey, this is what I'm experiencing, and they have a lived experience, and they can support you in the role from true peer support, but also as somewhat an advocate within the workplace, and can be that voice, because everybody should be able to access, to know their rights, access services, be able to stand on their own 2 feet and say, no, this is not okay. But sadly, it's unbelievable how many people we see that would rather lose a job than to take on that battle because they just don't have it in them. Yeah.
Absolutely. But just to speak to that, and again, like I've just based on experience and the battles, and it's kind of my day-to-day existence these days. I think that the worst thing that a group can do right now is to have if it's not an independent of the employer peer group, you're going to find what we're finding in a lot of human rights cases right now, right? And I'll use, I probably shouldn't, because I got to make sure of what I say. You'll have groups that have like certain, certain like committees or groups available for help if an employee is dealing with things, and it's an internal issue. It's all internally structured, which means I have a complaint. I feel discriminated against because of X, Y, and whatever issue. I go to my internal process, which has somebody there to hear me, somewhat like a peer support group internally. And then what ends up happening when you get there is now you have like a group of people who don't want to kind of shake the thing, right? So they'll just basically, so you have to make sure, because the idea is perfect, but I would strongly advise that not be an internal group. That needs to be an external independent group of the employer where somebody can go. Because if it's internal, everyone's still following the same kind of process. And it's so difficult for anything internal to be completely independent of the employer. We've seen it a million times. So, imagine having like a peer support group, maybe for an industry, and unions sometimes have that role in some ways where you can just call your union rep and say, hey, this is happening. But again, even that becomes problematic, right? So it's very complicated. But the idea is brilliant, right? Like, imagine being able to call, like, even as a lawyer, we have certain mechanisms in place in case we need help. But at the same time, if you had that kind of group available to you, but if it's independent of, if they just know the basic rights, if they know, okay, this is how we can get you through this issue, that's the best. If it's internal, you're going to end up in the same situation. Happens every day. You know what I mean?
And Rana, I'm just going to speak a little bit on on that, because Robin and I spent a lot of times working with corporations, implementing peer support into the workplace. And there's successful ways to do it where it can still stay internally, like within the company, but it's really utilizing the values and what peer support is and what it isn't. So for example, NAV Canada has an amazing peer support component, which is housed in NAV Canada, which has been going on for years and years and years, and it's really supporting the guys who are working in NAV Canada, and the women to the stresses around being in that industry and what that looks like. We've done it in multiple companies, with the success of still keeping it under in-house. So how that looks a lot of times is it's not housed under HR, it's completely separate. There's a code of conduct, being a peer support worker, that you have to abide by, and that's set up not only with like we have, and Amy can talk about it, and Kirsten too, there's a code of conduct that we have by being trained in peer support, and then incorporating that into the code of conduct around the industry or the corporation that you work within. You got to have buy-in from all areas of upper management for it to work successfully. So if you're getting any kind of sticky areas, it's not going to work. And it's that part where, unless it's harm to yourself, harm to others, a peer worker can't disclose, what is being said. Like I can't go and start saying, what Kirsten just told me. In peer support, we work with the individual to support them to come forward with the information. So it's not like we're tattling on them, but we are empowering them to start talking to their employer of what that looks like. So there's lots of stuff like that we work with for it to be successful in the companies. And a lot of times when they say they're doing peer support in companies and it's not, that's where it gets a little murky. So hence why Robin and I are doing this training, is because we want people to have the best experience being trained to be the best peer worker. And there's a lot of people saying they're doing peer support that really aren't. I mean, Amy, you want to talk on that?
on which part?
Do you find it works for, because I think you kind of hit on the point, right? There's a difference between people who are calling themselves peer support workers versus actually trained and training people to be peer support workers. So that's probably where the deeply distinguishing factor would be, right? Just to know who you're bringing in for training, and what kind of expertise and knowledge they're actually bringing to your organization, to your corporation, to make sure that it's actually effectively being implemented. But do you find that it works for discrimination issues? Like I know people will just say, okay, well, I'm being bullied here and I'm being this here, because do you find it's effective in those really deep systemic issues, like say in police or in some of those organizations that are really, I don't want to start calling out people, but struggling with internal issues, right? Like, would you guys think that would be, because I think that those organizations need to take a look at it if that's the case, right? They need to get somebody in there pretty fast to start dealing with these issues, to make.
And Rana, you're just talking on like so many different areas. Robin worked with some police organizations down in the United States for implementing peer workers to go on mental health calls as part of the team. So huge judgment or biases come out when you get a mental health call that they're dangerous, blah blah blah, like all these things. And when and Amy, I want you to talk on this too, is when you have a peer worker go in, it's just like a completely different conversation that you're going to have, as opposed to a guy or a girl in uniform who has no lived experience. So I love that one. I wish we had it here in Winnipeg as well. The police here in Winnipeg have peer support for police officers, and they have a really great program that they run. And Robin and I have met with them before and just love what they're doing. So they're really supporting that. We were just saying to them, could you just take it one step further? And we would love some peer workers to go on mental health calls with you guys too. So we're still chatting about that. Amy, do you want to talk a little bit more on that too?
Well, I guess I think at the end of the day, it's really a people human focus. That's peer support, and it's interesting because I've been calling these lines that claim that they do peer support, and it's been really interesting how just like with training and without the training, and I have called this particular line, and they're like, I'm like, oh, I want to take my life. And they're like, oh, how come? Like, what's wrong? What are you struggling with? That's sad to hear that you want to do that. Whereas the peer approach with like a trained approach, we would ask the question like, okay, do you want to take your life or do you want your circumstances to go away? And it opens up a conversation, a dialogue, whereas they sit back and they're like thinking, okay, yeah, I don't want to take my life. I want to make an extra $200 this month. I want to be able to buy bread so my kids can go to school with like a full belly. And they start thinking and they're like, okay, yeah, no, this is just a moment that I just need the support to get me through this chaos right now. And that's the huge difference between a trained peer support and a non-trained peer support. Yes.
That's amazing.
Amy, are you doing some undercover expose on what's going on here?
No, because I'm just coming, I guess I've been like liking a lot of like peer support stuff, and it's popping on my feed with different hotline. So I've been curious as one of our values of peer support. So I call, I try to make it short so I'm not wasting anyone's time and services. I just want to, I want to know. I'm like, this is how I would approach a conversation, and this is how they would approach. I don't want a pity party right now. I don't need someone to like, oh, poor baby, like what's going on? Yeah. And I think that's that's a big difference.
I like hearing that because I actually had a conversation with my friend, because same thing, a couple of Instagrams I follow that they're claiming trained peer support workers. So I actually asked a friend of mine, hey, would you please do me a favor and make a phone call? I'm dying to know, because I didn't want to call, but I'm with you. It's like, you know that it's not an intensive, proper peer training. And also there's a couple of levels to that, because you're putting somebody in the position that they're qualified, given that they have lived experience. So they're qualified regardless of where they are on their journey, what's triggering for them. Like without the skills and the intensive training, you're putting them in a position where not only are you putting them at risk, you're putting the person who's reaching out to them at risk as well. And you're doing such a disservice to the entire industry. So yeah, it kills me, Amy. And I have been looking at those two going, come on. So there you go.
Oh, we'll have a list at the end of this show. And and I just have to say, oh, sorry. I say, Linda, your dog sounds so big. Your dog has a big adult bark now for a little puppy. But go ahead, Charlotte.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Tracy, but it's just our hope is that like we want more peer workers. We just want them to have the proper training, because you have huge burnout with untrained peer workers, because they're trying to fix and solve everybody, and they're 24/7 answering their phones, and then they burn out, and then they're like, peer support doesn't work. Look what it just did to me. Like, and so that's another aspect that we see huge turnover in peer orgs, where the people just finally say, I can't do it, and they move on. But with proper training and proper supports, we offer, Robin right now is doing a peer supervisor course that we run all the time for supervisors who supervise peers. And the aha moments that they have in that training, they're like, oh, I didn't think of that. Oh, I didn't think of that. And you're just like, well, what have you been thinking about? So we're seeing some great change in that as well too. So
I want to ask you, there's kind of like, I'm not going to say an elephant in the room, but I'm curious. Women in power, how does that all get kind of muddled? And and how do we become I don't know, immune to, or you don't see it anymore, on how to treat people respectfully, having rights, like Rana said, creating a, what we all want is a warm and wonderful working environment. And women, we're supposed to be so much more, I think, intuitive to all of these things, but yet we can become the worst at it. I don't know. Linda, maybe because you do a lot of life coach business stuff. I know you're kind of going, what's she talking about? Okay, so there's a case right now going on. And
yeah, I know. I put that I put that over to Rana. I said, are you going to talk about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah. Okay, you can talk about it. Okay, we've got 10 minutes here, Rana. Go.
No, I actually, to be honest with you, I only know very, very topical stuff about it. I definitely know there's harassment in the workplace, and you see bullying and all these issues that are arising. I think that there's so many different layers to this. There's so many different perspectives. We saw this happen with Stella's. We see this happening across the board. And these are, it's hard, but these are very positive. And in my opinion, I think that we should see these as very positive movements, because you're having employees, they're having the space and what they need to be able to come out and say, okay, what's happening in our organization is actually deeply problematic. Because Stella's did it, Tiber will do it. I'm sure there's going to be a bunch more that would come up. I mean, I can almost guarantee it, that where they're just having internal issues. Women of power part of it, women in general, I don't think this is even to do with, women in power. I think that, for some reason, we always maybe hesitate a bit more before taking those steps, to call somebody, and I hate the word calling out, but you know what I mean, to draw it to the proper person's attention. But these are really changes that will come from people really breaking down some of those initial paths, right? Look what happened with Stella's. All the stuff with Stella's kind of hit the fan, and it's I would always argue that it's because of Stella's. That whole issue is why employees at Tiber felt the confidence to be able to do that, because they probably recognize that they would have the public support. They may not have all the other support they need, but in the court of public opinion, they're not going to be getting dragged through the mud as much as they would have as an individual taken on a big corporation. So, but you got to remember that there is some, there's some teams within those organizations, right? It's not just a one person saying one thing. They've created kind of some employee teams within each industry where they're all kind of coming out together, which is just going back to what you said. Like, they are finding their support, they are finding people to stand by them, they are really taking those steps. So maybe that is what we're looking for. We're looking for people to kind of stand by us when we're going through these really difficult times, to be able to say what needs to be said and hold people accountable. But at the end of the law, I still always have my law brain, which is like, when things are illegal, it's hard. It will definitely be hard. That's why most of us hate civil litigation, because these are really difficult things to go through. They're very adversarial. It's a lose-lose situation, but there's always other avenues. People can always go through some kind of mediation, or have people sitting at tables and really fighting out what actually happened. And sometimes those are always way more effective. And that's kind of why I like tribunals. I like the human rights component of it. I like labor, because there is an opportunity for you to tell your story and to tell it without being judged in that kind of like, well, no, you took this as this, or whatever you would find in court, right? So
right.
Yeah, so it's super interesting, very, very layered. I don't think we can have a 5-minute discussion about what's happening there, but I think kind of power to them, and stand up and do what you got to do is all I can
It dawned on me like a couple of seconds in. I'm like, oh, I know now. I know what you're referring to. I got, oh, right. And Rana, I love what you said about the accountability, because to me, that's one thing is past year, especially, I think we've heard the phrase cancel culture and call out culture, but I've heard people say this, let's rephrase that. This is an accountability culture. People are not getting away with what they used to. They're not getting away with sexual harassment anymore. Me Too, came out for that. Things in the workplace are starting to come out. It's really a very powerful thing. And I think that speaks to what Charlotte and Kirsten and Amy are talking about, the peer support is, and what you were saying, Rana, is there is power in group support. Think back to when you were, a little kid, and you're like, okay, let's go tell, like you'd link arms with your buddy and you'd go, yeah, let's go tell. And, but that's powerful at this point, to hold people accountable, whether it is women in power or men in power, it's a very positive movement. In my opinion.
And I was just going to add that, as a business owner, Robin and I are always going back to, like, when we got together to form our company, we did an exercise around values and what was important to us. And everything that we do always goes back to those initial values that we created. And as you grow bigger, that's when you don't want to forget those values that started your company and what was important to you. And I think that's often what happens is you get to that point where you're just not there anymor, and you need to do a recheck, like you really do. So
no, that's so true. And that's like, we can even take our lives and point, right? You had your best friends in high school and you're going to be friends forever. And some of you probably still have your friends, but certainly not that same relationship, because your lives change, you grow. And I mean, and same in business, you get busier, you multiply, you're pivoting, and there's a lot of stress and all these changes too, and you forget. But you're right, that's not an excuse. Accountability, remember, return back to the people that made you who you are, like all of you lovely ladies here. And next week, you guys all have to come back, because it's all about endless roses. She's got a new kiosk at the outlet mall. Ron is going, oh, endless roses. Yes. Yeah. So we can all, maybe send ourselves some roses that won't wilt or die, in a week.
Nice.
Okay. Anyways, have a wonderful Tuesday. And thank you so much for this great conversation. I am going to re-listen again and take in all of this, but I do love that. Accountability culture. Yes. And know my rights. Good God. Yes. Okay. That'll be a good, yeah, that'll be a long read on the internet. Thank you, Rana. Can I just hire you? Okay.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
bye.
Bye-bye.